Hello, everyone. I'm Keith DeStone with the Center for Hellenic Studies, and I'm here as usual with Greg Nagy and Sarah and Jenna and Elen for office hours for HeroesX. The 16th iteration of HeroesX is what we're in right now, and we're talking about hours 9 and 10. Greg, the question that you posed to the participants for hour 9 is as follows, and it's a long one, and it's in your voice. When I was a PhD student at Harvard, Greg says, so many years ago, I once heard something most striking from my old teacher, John H. Finley, who was a stellar professor of ancient Greek literature. Odysseus, he said in one of his lectures, gets a good press only in the Odyssey. Well, he was certainly right in implying that Odysseus gets a bad press in ancient Greek traditions situated outside our Odyssey. That is to say, he is an incorrigible trickster, as anthropologists would say it, and he tends to violate social norms. Perhaps he can even violate moral norms. I cannot disagree with such formulations. But my question here is heading in a different direction. Can we say that Odysseus gets bad press even in our Odyssey? Well, what are folks saying?
Well, one comment is, I see more good press than bad press for Odysseus.
Yes.
The men who fought war with him, Menelaus, Nestor, they have very good things to say about him. Yes. The gods are working to get him back to Ithaca, and he's expected in his land by everyone, including his son, his wife, and his wife is still faithful to him.
Yes. All that is true. All that is true. And he even gets a hero cult implicitly. But we'll talk about that in another sequence. That's all true. Well, my favorite example of Odysseus showing that he is a trickster who violates norms of behavior, social behavior, is when in Odyssey 8, he, as a guest who has not yet even identified himself, goes up to the portions of meat, or I should say, the pre-divided portions of meat that are being served up for the feast, and he starts carving the meat as if he were the host. But he's the guest, and he has not even yet established himself as a legitimate guest, because for that you have to name yourself in order to get the proper reciprocity eventually that the host will give you. And there he is acting exactly in the reverse way of the way you should behave at a dinner. Okay, but that's not morally questionable, so can't really call it bad press. But there are so many situations where he just loses self-control and damages himself. And I think the best example is where he boasts to Polyphemus, the blinded Cyclops, that it was he who did it. And that incurs a curse that will then stick with him like flypaper. But I concede to the participant that by and large, he gets a very good press in the Odyssey. Even though there are hints, there are hints, for example, in Odyssey 11, where we witness the encounter with Ajax, who has a very legitimate grudge against Odysseus, since Odysseus used trickery to win the prize of the second best of the Achaeans in this rivalry between Odysseus and Ajax about who will inherit the armor of Achilles after Achilles dies. And even in more recent work and published by our colleague Keith, I have made the argument that Odyssey 11 does refer to the morally questionable behavior of Odysseus at the so-called judgment of the arms. And even the way he says, well, let's let bygones be bygones. Yeah, sure. Let's let bygones be bygones. But there's Ajax in Hades, and he just never got what was his due in life. That's pretty serious. Well, I'm talking too much, but let's see if participants have any other examples of bad press inside the Odyssey.
Mm-hmm. A participant said he is not, for Odysseus, he is not the man left Troy. And we have seen him in Iliad and in Odyssey. He has a long rap sheet, but because we see him more, does that make him we see bad size more as well as good size because he is more visible in the epic?
Well, now there I would say that the Iliad is much more clear about the morally questionable aspects of Odysseus. I think of Iliad 9, where the way Odysseus, how shall I put it, reports the offer that Agamemnon makes to Achilles is presented in such a way that Odysseus leaves out the part of the offer of Agamemnon that would force Achilles to refuse. And Odysseus leaves it out. And I'm talking about the part where Agamemnon had said, in instructing the three emissaries, that if Achilles accepts the reconciliation offer of Agamemnon, that will prove that Agamemnon is superior to Achilles, presumably as a human, not just socially superior. So in other words, it's almost like an attempt at sabotage of Achilles' epic reputation. And when Achilles says, as hateful to me as the gates of Hades is someone who says one thing and means another thing, I think that's Odysseus. So so Janet, I'm making a distinction here between the level of the intensity of bad press in the Iliad for Odysseus, as distinct from what we see in the Odyssey. That's not to say that Odysseus gets mostly good press even in the Iliad. I concede that, but all I'm saying is after all, Odysseus is the star of the Odyssey, not of the Iliad. So it shows.
Some of our participants are reading this for the first time. So as far as scroll 8, they haven't perhaps seen some of the bad press that kind of gets hinted at, we start seeing revealed a bit later on. But someone has given quite a list of things. They, right, starting from when they first leave Troy, they start just going and randomly sacking cities and things like that. And there are examples of his poor judgment. They've commented that a couple of recent translators have referred to him as a pirate. So, these are perhaps other people's reactions. You referred to him as a trickster, but some of these actions, could we say that they're not just being a trickster, it's poor judgment. It's really pretty bad.
Yes, and thank you, Sarah, for mentioning that. And in one case, you could describe it as a war crime. And I'm thinking of the execution of the child of Hector and Andromache. And if I'm right in my interpretation of the third song of Demodocus and how that is shaped, now, spoiler alert, because I understand that our participants haven't got that far probably, but in Odyssey 8, there are hints of a war crime.
Well, shall we move to the next Odyssey-related question, which is, if you had to explain the relationship of Nóstos and Nóos by way of only one single story as retold in the Homeric Odyssey, for example, the Lotus Eaters, the Sirens, or one of the many others, which would you choose and why?
That's a real gift. I think that's one of the most fun questions I've ever asked. So many answers.
Yes, and one participant chooses the scroll 13 when Odysseus is just back to Ithaca. By masking the land, Athena has altered Odysseus' news in much the same way as eating the lotus would have done.
Yes, yes, yes.
And Athena reveals the land as Ithaca, and his Nóos returns. And now he has achieved Nóstos.
Brilliant. Yeah, yeah. What a lovely formula. I couldn't possibly improve it. It's beautiful.
One participant mentioned sirens. Sirens are singing beautifully. But in your book, you referred them as fake muses. So with his, if he loses his nose and just listens to these songs, he cannot go home. What is this relationship between Nóos and Nóstos in that sense? Listening to sirens.
Yes. Our dear friend and colleague Keith has a lovely essay about that. And if I remember your turn of phrase, Keith, you say he needs to get over his accomplishments at Troy. He needs to get over what he was in the Iliadic tradition, and that goes beyond our Iliad, because after all, it's his intelligence that ultimately wins the day and gives success to the 10-year effort of the Achaeans. It's his brains, not the muscles of Achilles, that finally achieve the goal of capturing Troy. But Keith, you say it so much better.
Well, I think you all have to go find it to read it, because I forget exactly how the muse told it to me at that moment. But yeah, the sirens as fake muses, I mean, they're telling the wrong story at this point. The Iliad's over, Odysseus can't, and Greg, you're kind of one of the muses here who told me about things. I have to give you credit for that. But Odysseus can't listen to that part of the story anymore. He has to focus on the new part of returning and making a new song. So that's how they're the fake muses, I would say.
And Keith, I didn't think of it when I was producing the 1979 book, Best of the Achaeans. I didn't even think of it 20 years later when the second edition of Best of the Achaeans appeared in 1999. But as I look back on the first song of Demodocus, and I know this is going to be a spoiler again, our participants should not be forced to look ahead to Odyssey 8, but I'll just make a little comment about the first song of Demodocus, where it turns out that what the singer of tales is singing there is not just one song, but many songs, because the audience keeps saying, do another one, do another one, do another one. So I think there's not just one micro Iliad in the first performance of Demodocus. There are a whole bunch of micro Iliads. And he's got to get over it, as you say in your essay. Maybe we could give the link to that in our edited version of this office hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting to me that Odysseus doesn't get over it until really he connects with it when Demodocus is singing, and Odysseus has this breakdown that you describe in your book. And
Spoiler
things start to
alert.
move. Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
So another example that has come up is, well, there's a couple actually, and I'd maybe like to link them. So with the Lotus Eaters, Odysseus is still very much in control of his Norse. He notices what's happened to them and he manages to rescue them. But by the time he reaches Circe's island, he's completely lost his total sense of direction. He is disorientated.
Yes.
And so, and his companions know, well, if Odysseus has lost all sense, then, you know, we haven't got a chance because they're all relying on him. Yes. So could you talk a bit more about that kind of relationship between the Norse of Odysseus as referring to the companions?
Yes. We talked today in psychologizing the sorrows of people about survivor's guilt. Well, he should have a lot of survivor's guilt, because unlike Achilles, who dies, but in the process of his death and the death of his in the previous death of his other self, Patroclus, does save the aggregate, the totality of Proto-Greeks, the Achaeans, from the fire of Hector. So he's a savior, but in a way, Odysseus is a non-savior. He saves only his own self. Everybody else dies. Everybody. And
there's a kind of a spoiler right at the very opening of the Odyssey, isn't there? He could not save his companions, even though he very much wanted to.
He wanted to, but he didn't. The fact is, he didn't. So isn't it curious that we often think of Achilles as the alienated loner and Odysseus as the company man, but it's the company man who loses the company.
Yeah, so there is a comment from a participant about that, because the participant says that, okay, he brings back his companion and then secure them at the benches, but do they really get their nose back?
No.
Right.
No, only he does. Only he does when he wakes up and he's in Ithaca and the morning star comes. Ooh, spoiler alert.
That can just be encouragement for all of you participants to keep reading ahead. There's good stuff coming.
But to relieve my guilt, as Sarah pointed out, the Odyssey already starts with a spoiler in the first 5 lines of the epic. He's the sole survivor.
Right in.
He tried to save his companions, but he couldn't. As the French say, sauve qui peut, right? Hélène, do you want to comment on that scary French saying, sauve qui peut?
Sauve qui peut. You go away, you run away, and then too bad for the rest of the people. I mean,
Yeah.
You save whoever can be saved, and that's it.
In English, it's not as powerful when we say every man for himself.
Yes.
Well, we even see him doing that in the Iliad at one point. He's being asked, come and help us save somebody, and he just legs it right back to the shore.
Yes.
Looking back.
Yes. My goodness.
More bad press.
More bad press.
All right, friends. Well, thanks for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you. And thanks to the participants. Wow, we have a great group of fellow readers.